The GST dilemma. Who bears the cost, states or centre? GST overhaul exposes federal fault lines. Festive cheer for middle class. But will states bleed revenue? Will GST cuts widen fiscal inequalities between states? Centre versus opposition ruled states. Consumer cheer cuts. Revenue loss looms. Politics over GST.
Hello and welcome. You're watching To The Point. I'm Preeti Choudhry. Well, the big GST tax bonanza for consumers. Having said that, on the other hand, the opposition-ruled states have raised an apprehension. They want the revenue loss to be absorbed by the centre. While the GST Council meet, there was complete consensus, even by the opposition states, that this was a long time in the coming. But certain apprehensions have been raised by opposition-ruled states. Let's quickly cut across to our panelists this evening. Joining me, Dr. Amit Mitra, who was the chairman, he's a renowned economist, he was the chairman of the Empowered Committee of All State Finance Minister, which agreed to bring GST earlier, viewers. However, there was a provision on that West Bengal wanted to be compensated to states for loss of revenue for 5 years. Dr. Mitra, appreciate you joining us this evening. Thank you there. In your view, what compelled the government to take this step now? Why now? Was it economic prudence, political compulsions? How do you read it?
I think it is sad that the Prime Minister on your channel, Honorable Prime Minister, said that this was federalism. He announced this reform without consulting states from the Red Fort. The finance minister met with a group of ministers and told them what to do. In the GST Council, 11 ministers asked for compensation for the loss that will happen, and their voices were muffled. So while it's a great step, late as it may be, Prime Minister said the cement rate in some other government was 29%, it was 28% on this government. So late as ever, it's a very good step, provided the common people get the benefit of this reduction. Why do I say that? Because there was a committee called the Anti-Profiteering Authority, which made sure that the lowered GST would be passed on to the consumers. That committee has sunset. So I'm not sure that this will be the case. But I would also like to add, the first one who moved the ball was, I must confess, not credit-taking issue. Mamata Banerjee said, in health and life insurance must go to zero. And our Member of Parliament, Saket, had raised it in Parliament. I'm glad that that has now been accepted by the central government. And today we will, hopefully from 22nd, we'll have zero GST in place of 18% in life and health insurance. But the key point is, what happens to the revenues of the states and how do they get compensated? As you said, when we started GST, central government agreed for 5 years to compensate the states, Arun Jaitley. And therefore, all the finance ministers, not me, not Bengal, all the finance ministers said, okay, now that we have a consensus with the center, we'll go ahead. So where is the compensation? What will be the loss to the states? And remember, if states lose health, education, empowerment of women, empowerment of the girl child, empowerment of SC/ST, student scholarships, you name it. All these are done by the states. So if they lose revenue, common people who may gain something from a soap or a shampoo will lose the fundamental requirement of education, health,
Right.
etc.
Dr. Mitra, what is now clearly seen as consumer chair has also exposed what you call federal fault lines. West Bengal government had warned that the revised GST could cost, and correct me if I'm wrong, could cost the state around 477 billion rupees. How valid now do you think are these concerns? Is that number actually correct? And should the centre, which you did ask even during the council meet, which is West Bengal, had asked for it, along with other opposition ruled states, that compensation be given?
Yes, I think we must remember it's not West Bengal alone. 11 ministers, 8 of whom are opposition ministers, one chief minister who's not, one from Northeast, and one other minister from BJP on written note said we are very worried about the loss of revenue. My problem is, in the press conference, the revenue secretary said, after some prodding by the journalists, that the revenue loss will be 48,000 crores. 48,000 crores. But he added a rider which nobody noticed.
But Dr. Mitra, he said revenue implication. He didn't say revenue loss.
Well, he insisted don't call it loss, but we all know that it is essentially loss of revenue. You can keep on saying implication, I'm not willing to buy. It's a loss. Now, he also added, we have not decided on the supply chain how much would be lost. Let me explain that. You buy a bottle of shampoo. That shampoo has surfactants, sulfate, all those are charged at 18%. So what does the producer do? They take that, require it as input tax credit, and comes back and said, look, compensate me, I paid 18% tax on these. Now the government of India and the states will have to pay that person. It's called refund. Now imagine thousands of inputs which are above this 5%, they're about 18%. All of those will come back and ask for input tax credit, all of which have to be refunded. So I'm saying what the revenue secretary said, 48,000 crores is not at all the appropriate number, because he also added that he didn't know about the supply chain. They haven't yet calculated. Calculated is more than 1 lakh crores easily.
Okay. But Dr. Mitra, right before the GST Council meet, SBI research, what was released right before the meet was that net gainers from GST collections will be states, even under the proposed rate rationalization that we've seen because of the unique revenue sharing architecture of the tax. This is an SBI report. The research says out of every 100 rupees of GST collected, states ultimately will accrue 70 rupees, which is 70% of total GST revenue. Given this, how do states like yours explain their stand?
I think you look at the SBI's own research earlier, you will find they said there'll be a big loss. All of a sudden, just before this happens, SBI says, no, there'll be a gain. Now look, SBI is a government of India bank controlled by the secretary banking of the finance ministry. And the environment in which this GST took place, all the ministers are saying, and privately some BJP ministers, that is a completely rump process. So what can poor SBI do? So I would not accept that. I've explained to you why the 48,000 crores loss is not good enough, and where this supply chain will end up, we'll have to see. And I can give you constructive suggestion on how this can be, that the central government can in fact use two alternative ways to compensate the states very easily. If you want, I'll tell you what they are.
You've said that. You've said that before, Dr. Mitra. But in that press conference, you had the finance minister also said that it's not just the states, even the centre would be losing. And there are experts that seem to suggest that states may consider increasing taxes on fuel, liquor to offset part of the revenue loss due to GST cuts.
I think you said an interesting thing, which is fuel. Now, let me tell you that in petroleum and diesel, the government of India has increased, instead of a tax, they have increased the cess to 92% of what you pay as tax and 88% in diesel. Now, cess means states do not get 1 paisa. Whereas, had it been a tax, which was the case years ago, states would have got 41% of the petroleum diesel taxes that the center receives. I mean, I think this is horrible that you keep on increasing the cess so that you deny the states 41% of what they could get. Now, you explain to me, is that fair? Because you raised that question of petroleum.
All right, Dr. Mitra, I'm going to one quick question because you wanted to talk about it, where you want to give your opinion on how the center can actually compensate the states on revenue loss. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, I think the first one I'll give you is there is a section 9 of the law, not of the constitution. And repeatedly, what the section 9 will allow us to do, if you amend it, it can take the sin goods, which are tobacco and tobacco-related products, you can take them to up to 60 to 70%. Now, pan masala is already at 70%. All that you need is section 9 of the law be amended, which has been done at least twice a year in many cases, so it's nothing new. The minute you do that, the extra money that you will make from sin goods can be given to the states. That can even be a sharing idea, but that idea never struck them. 53% is what you're talking about in terms of sin goods before. So go to 60 or 70%, no problem. WHO says 70%, and give it to the states as much as you want. Share it with the center, I have no problem. The second option, I mean, we don't want this option. Second option is petrol and diesel, which you mentioned. The central government has collected 2.7 lakh crores in petrol and diesel cess, not tax. Take that, be normal and generous in a federalist polity, make that instead of cess, make it a tax, then states will get 41% of that. So either you pick the petrol diesel one or you pick the sin good one, doesn't hurt anybody, it does not have any implications on the consumer.
Okay.
But you won't do it. 11 ministers demanding that you do this. So how does one deal with this? Where is federalism?
Well, the government says that the spirit of federalism cuts both ways, and it's not just the onus of the center. But you put your point forward, Dr. Mitra. I appreciate you taking the time off and joining us and giving up the details of where at least West Bengal
I'm sorry,
stands.
you asked about West Bengal.
Right.
67,000 crores was the cess collected from West Bengal in petroleum diesel. Had they given it to us as made it tax, you know how much West Bengal alone will get? 25,000 crores, 41%. Imagine what the states will gain: health, education, empowerment of women, and so many things I've said at the beginning will all get empowered.
All right.
Let's be normal. Let's be federalist.
You put your point forward, sir. I thank you. I appreciate you joining us, Dr. Mitra, Principal Chief Advisor to the West Bengal Chief Minister. Thank you. Thank you, sir, for joining us. Let's quickly cut across to Vishwajit Rane, Minister for Health, Women, Child Development, Urban Development, Town Planning and Forest from the Government of Goa. Appreciate you joining us, sir. Quick words in on what is clearly seen as GST restructuring, which has added a fair amount of cheer, especially where the middle class of this country is concerned. A long time in the coming.
Preeti ji, actually, this is a landmark move of the Honorable Prime Minister. If you see that the statement made by the Honorable Prime Minister on the 15th of August and and overall change in the whole structure. As a health minister, as I joined your show, for us in the state of Goa and all across the country, speaking to a lot of professionals, this has actually brought in a landmark kind of a move, because it makes medicines accessible to the poor people. People ongoing treatments will be taken care of. And if you look at it, if you see that the drugs and medicines, the GST, the old rate of 12% has been reduced to 5%. You have the medical devices again reduced to 5% from 12%. Then you also have the spectacle lenses, 12% to 5%. Most importantly, the individual life insurance and health insurance, which has been reduced from 18% to virtually nil, bringing more, which will bring in more people under the gambit of insurance, which the Honorable Prime Minister has been always saying, insurance to all. And we are moving in that direction. Preeti ji, actually today, this move of actually bringing down this GST of more than 33 life-saving drugs, 33 life-saving drugs,
Right.
and on, there are some specific very high-value drugs where the GST has been reduced to zero. Looking at it, the HSBC analysis, which I was just going through, says that we are moving in that direction for insurance to all. And I think it's a great move by the Honorable Prime Minister Modi ji, who has actually made healthcare, medicines accessible to the poorest segment of society.
All right. One very quick question, Minister of Health for the state of Goa, before we let you go. Of course, you've touched on, especially where health is concerned, the health sector, insurance is concerned. This is a boon. But where states are concerned, we were talking to other, the finance minister we're going to speak to right now of Punjab as well. There is apprehension. Who's going to absorb the revenue loss?
No, there is apprehension, because whenever such landmark moves are made, it is not only like, I was just listening to your show just some time back. It is from the center also. There's a loss pertaining to the center also with the moves that they make, and also sometimes it affects the state. But the state, there are various mechanisms in which to deal with it. Today, as a health minister, the priority area as far as health is concerned, and we are seeing how it is going to benefit the common man and better quality. Honorable Prime Minister's vision of healthcare to all. I am just restricting myself to this particular issue, that this is definitely going to help the community on the whole. There will be a tremendous
there's no
amount
denying
of saving.
that. True, sir. There's no denying that.
There's going to be tremendous amount of saving also in terms of preventive medicine protocols that states can follow.
Right.
And this
in
can
the
be
health
offset,
sector, this is a boon. Right.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Appreciate you joining us, sir. We're going to join you for a longer interview later. I want to quickly cut across to Harpal Singh Cheema, Finance, Excise and Taxation Planning Minister for Punjab. He was part of the GST Council, which was to discuss and deliberate of over 2 days. But in 1 day, there was consensus that was reached, but 11 states did give a dissent note, especially on compensation of the revenue loss to states. चीमा साहब, बहुत शुक्रिया, आप हमसे जुड़ रहे हैं. आप मेंबर थे जीएसटी काउंसिल के. जो उसमें डिस्कशन हुआ, आम आदमी पार्टी ने साफ बोला है कि देखिए, हम विद द गवर्नमेंट हैं ऑन द जीएसटी कट्स, बट कॉम्पनसेशन ऑफ रेवेन्यू होना चाहिए.
देखिए, 2017 में जब जीएसटी देश भर में लागू हुआ, तो पंजाब ने भी बिल्कुल अपने आप को इस वन नेशन वन टैक्स के फार्मूले में शामिल किया. पंजाब ने भी इसे एक्सेप्ट किया. तब पंजाब का जो रेवेन्यू न्यूट्रल रेट था, वो देश भर में सबसे ज़्यादा था, 18.3 था, जबकि देश का नेशनल एवरेज 14% था रेवेन्यू न्यूट्रल रेट, पर पंजाब का 18.3 था. तो जो अब जीएसटी लागू होने के बाद कम होके 14% पे आ गया, कम हो रहा है, लगातार कम हो रहा है. तो जो मैं आपको फिगर्स की बात करूं, तो पंजाब का जो शॉर्टफॉल आया है जीएसटी लागू होने के बाद, लगभग 1,11,000 करोड़ रुपए शॉर्टफॉल आया जीएसटी की इम्प्लीमेंटेशन के बाद. 2017 से लेकर 2025 तक की मैं बात कर रहा हूं. तो उसमें से लगभग 61,000 CR जो है, वो सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट ने कंपनसेशन के रूप में हमें दे दिया. तो इसका मतलब अब भी पंजाब का लगभग अप्रॉक्सीमेटली 50,000 CR जो है, वो कम जो है पंजाब को मिला है. यानी कि पंजाब का लॉस हुआ है 50,000 करोड़ का. तो अब ये रेट रैशनलाइजेशन आई है, तो हम इसका स्वागत करते हैं. हम बिल्कुल देश के साथ हैं, हमने इसका वेलकम किया है प्रपोजल का. पर लेकिन अब एक बार फिर शॉर्टफॉल आएगा. अब एक बार फिर, क्योंकि हमने थोड़ा मैकेनिज्म बना के देखा कि लगभग 20% के करीब और शॉर्टफॉल आने वाला है पंजाब का. तो मेरी तो माननीय देश के वित्त मंत्री साहब को यही रिक्वेस्ट थी जीएसटी काउंसिल में भी, अब भी यही है कि कोई ना कोई मैकेनिज्म होना चाहिए, चाहे वो कंपनसेशन सेस के रूप में, कोई अदर कोई लेवी शुड बी इम्पोज ऑन सर्टन थिंग्स, ऑन सिन थिंग्स, ताकि जो है जिन भी स्टेटों की शॉर्टफॉल आ रहा है रेवेन्यू का वो पूरा हो सके। जब तक स्टेट जो हैं वो स्टेबल नहीं होते, उनकी इकॉनमी स्टेबल नहीं होती, इस कंपनसेशन सेस को किसी ना किसी रूप में लगा के रखना चाहिए। ये मेरा क्लेम था और इस पे मैं अपना स्टैंड रखा पंजाब का। लेकिन हम इस फैसले का तो स्वागत करते हैं, पर जो नुकसान होगा उस नुकसान को कौन भर पाएगा?
उसकी भरपाई
क्योंकि स्टेटों ने फार्मूला सेंटर का माना, क्योंकि जीएसटी आने से पहले जब वैट रजीम था, वैल्यू एडेड टैक्स था, वैट रजीम था, तो उसमें हमारा रेवेन्यू ज्यादा आता था, जो मैंने आपको आंकड़ा बताया, तो उसमें रेवेन्यू ज्यादा आता था। जो अब रेवेन्यू कम हुआ है तो कम से कम उसका तो हमें कंपनसेट करना चाहिए। हमारा रेवेन्यू जो है वो उसकी प्रोटेक्शन करने के लिए कोई ना कोई डिफरेंट मैकेनिज्म, चाहे वो कंपनसेशन सेस के रूप में, चाहे कभी और कोई मैकेनिज्म होना चाहिए।
Cheema sir, बहुत शुक्रिया for joining us. Harpal Cheema, part of the GST Council as Finance Minister Punjab, said they were with the government where GST cuts were concerned, but they did put in a dissent note on who will compensate for revenue loss, and they continue to push the government on that. Joining me right now is someone who's championed GST restructuring for very long. Dr. Arvind Virmani, member, Niti Aayog, and noted senior economist, former India's representative, IMF, former chief economic advisor, Government of India. Sir, my first question, what according to you compelled the government to make this decision of restructuring GST now, the timing of it?
So, as you know, in the budget, there were several items and statements regarding reform. So, the Prime Minister has been telling us for some time, I think he sums it up in one sentence: reform, perform, transform. And of course, the Viksit Bharat discussions, a lot of ideas on policies, institutional reform. So, I think it's part of that basic program or approach of the government to reduce difficulties in business and to promote productivity and growth to achieve Viksit Bharat goals. So, the budget, I'll point out two items. The income tax law was introduced, had parliament committee discussions, etc., was revised and passed by parliament. So, that was in a way a precursor. There were also several statements on deregulation, etc. So I see that as part of the ongoing reforms, and of course PM made a statement from on August 15 about GST reform. I think one thing which has surprised even myself, I would say, because I have been kind of talking about researching GST reform for, I don't know, decades, is the speed with which this has been done.
Many also suggesting that the speed could also be to offset the Trump tariff. But, sir, getting you back in on this, within the centre's total tax revenue, including GST, 1/3 is shared with states. So overall, 2/3 of GST revenue loss, at least what experts seem to suggest, and correct me if I'm wrong, would fall on the states. Therefore, will states now foot major part of the lost revenue from the proposed rationalization of GST slabs?
This is a technical issue which I don't get into. From what I read, it is clear that this has been stated, it's come out in the public domain, but I have no specific inside knowledge. But we know from past history that states, the GST Council, states control more than half of it. So presumably they had certain statements or conditions for supporting this reform, and I'm sure there was a discussion and adjustment were decided on. But I am not privy to those. The finance minister will probably tell you. I'm just going on history. I would not be surprised if what you say happens.
You have touched on the fact that the trade-off between revenue loss and increased consumption. The other thing that people are also speaking of, the aspect of what, according to you, would be the challenges now that may arise in the implementation of the flat 40% on what is now being called the sin tax. Many say some goods, at least interimly, will get cheaper.
I am not sure I agree with the question. I don't know what the challenge is, but okay, let me firstly, the sin tax is like a media thing. I don't know why we use it, but it's okay. I mean, these things simplify. So there are two parts of it. One is, in a way, a health tax, which is to discourage use of tobacco and similar products which are harmful to people. And this is a standard, it's called a negative externality in economics. So having a higher tax on tobacco, I do it because I would recommend it because that tax will reduce consumption of tobacco and increase people's health. So in that sense, I don't look at it as a kind of sin tax, so to say. But that's okay. I mean, one can use any word. The second part of it is really what used to be called luxury. Again, in economic terms, I prefer to call it an income elastic good. So large cars, medium cars, you would think of as elastic in the demand elastic, which is as income increases, more and more of these are consumed. So that makes the GST as a whole more income elastic, which is what we want. We want revenues from GST to increase as the average income of people increases. So that is the second part. I mean, I am kind of uncomfortable with calling it a sin tax. I guess the only thing that may apply to is kind of like gaming or gambling, perhaps.
All right, appreciate you joining us, sir. With that, it's a quick wrap. On to the point. Of course, we're going to keep our eyes trained on all the impact and the implication of what clearly is a GST bonanza where consumers are concerned.